2, 1.
Okay, this really was a tough week for a lot of fans out in Hollywood. A heartbreaking week.
Right.
When we lost Luke Perry only at 52.
Yeah.
At side of 90210, and then
Riverdale,
and then Jan Michael Vincent from Airwolf at 74. It's a real tough week, and to do a proper tribute to talk about both gentlemen who we sadly lost this week is our movie critic, Rocco Pasafume.
Thank you very much, Howie. To start off with Luke Perry. Luke Perry was huge in the early 90s, particularly. He started as an actor on the soap opera Loving, and then he ended up with the role that defined him pretty much, Beverly Hills 90210. He played a penultimate role, even though he wasn't on the pilot episode of that show. When the show got picked up, he was part of the cast, and I think he was a major part of why that show was so popular. I mean, it wasn't just, the thing about Beverly Hills 90210 and why so many people loved that show at the time was because it was the first time a teen show had ever been done in prime time. You have to look at it this way. Teen shows before 90210 mainly appealed to children. This was a show that appealed not even just to specifically teenagers, but to adults as well. And I think that was a big part of why 90210 was such a huge hit. And a big part of why Luke Perry was such a big part of that show was because he brought to it like this sense of he was his whole aesthetic was very comparable to James Dean. He had the sideburns, he had this kind of demeanor that was very much like a more mature demeanor than you would normally see out of a teen show. So he really gave it like a lot of gravity that most of these types of teen shows would not normally see. And I think that as 90210 became less of like an episodic kind of lighthearted that kind of teen show where it was about you kind of learn the life lesson after every episode. In its transition to becoming more like a soap opera, it's hard to imagine that Luke Perry wasn't a big part of why that transition to soap opera became successful. He really gave that kind of dramatic gravity that that was necessary for that to happen. The thing that I think most people would be very surprised about with Luke Perry was he did forays into comedy at the height of his popularity, particularly on The Simpsons. This was the biggest example of that. He was on The Simpsons, he played himself, and he also was on Family Guy in the very beginning of that show and played himself. And he really showed that he had like a flair of comedy. Like most people, they look at Luke Perry and they don't expect a comedic presence, and he brought a sense of comedy and a sense of kind of like an ability to poke fun at himself, and I think that was part of what made him so endearing. Even to be doing a teen show now, which is what he ended up doing before he died. He was on Riverdale on the CW, one of the most popular shows on television, and he played a parental figure on that, so it's sort of like an interesting kind of full circle of how he went from being a teen on a show to being the parental figure on that. It's sort of like a weird irony in a sense, but he played all that relatively well, and I think it was a big part of how Riverdale appeals to more than just teenagers. There's adults that watch the show. It has cross-generational appeal, also because of the fact that it's based on the Archie comics, and the Archie comics appeal spans generations. It's been around since the 40s. So Luke Perry was a big part of, appealing Riverdale particularly to a wide audience. And I think also with 90210, he managed to make the show's popularity evolve with adults. And I think if it wasn't for Luke Perry, that 90210 would not have lasted as long as it did. Because, he left 90210 around, I think, 94 or 95. And then a couple years later, when the ratings for 90210 were starting to kind of wither, they brought him back. So I think it really speaks to how much he was a big part of that show. And I think that he made a big presence on television. So, with the way he died, it's very shocking because, he died at 52 of a stroke. Most people, they have strokes in the 60s and their 70s, but the fact that he had a stroke at a very young age is very, very telling. And I think we'll never really know why he ended up having a stroke, but the thing that I think might play into that was I was reading some articles about him, and he had changed his diet a couple years ago. And I mean, we'll never know if I can kind of connect the dots with that. But it's definitely an interesting thing to look into as to how somebody that, like what his, physical health would have been around that time before because it's just such a shocking death, to have that. And it's very sad for not only for the cast and the crew of Riverdale, but also because they were going to revive 90210 and have, I don't know if he was going to be part of that, but the fact that they were in the midst of talking about reviving 90210 for like a brief run on Fox is definitely, it just speaks to how many people loved 90210 in the 90s and even in the 2000s, because that was revived on the CW. They revived it with a new cast, and they involved some of the members of the original cast. Now, getting to Jan Michael Vincent, he's not quite as familiar compared to Luke Perry. He was on a show called Airwolf. It was originally on CBS, and then it ended up getting canceled on CBS and then got saved by the USA Network. So I'm not quite as familiar with his history, but the fact that, for any, it's always sad when actors, such great talent, passes, because we think about how much they make an impact on, our lives and where we were when we were watching these shows, and what they brought to the roles and they brought to these characters. And, you definitely think about with both of these actors how much they, they really kind of harken you back to a period in your life, especially with Luke Perry. Luke Perry was 90210 was a huge show in the 90s. There was it was like a part of the merchandising bonanza. You had dolls, it was just, it's kind of crazy because there have been teen shows of that caliber like 90210 in the years since, but none of them had this kind of phenomenal level of success that appealed to not just teenagers but young girls that 90210 had. It's just such a unique time to grow up in with that kind of level of popularity. So I think with the passing of Luke Perry and Jan Michael Vincent, it just speaks to people ask why do we care about these celebrities so much? You think that it's because of what their art brought to so many people and their personalities and brought to it harkens back to, like I said, it harkens back to a period in your life where you you think about like how much their performances make an impact on how your sense of entertainment and all that. So I think that it definitely is a big loss, particularly Luke Perry for television, because he did make quite a big impact on 90210, and he did have a fairly big presence on Riverdale as well. So it's just one of those things where you really think about like I said, like the impact of their performances. That's always going to be felt with you, regardless of how much time has passed. So definitely is what I have to say. So thank you.
Okay, great job, Rocco. And again, our very sad week with the passing of Luke Perry and Jan Michael Vincent. But great job, Rocco, on retrospective.
Thank you.